a second to have a really special thank you for Emily and her guidance in the last session. Sean and I were both away together on what was called a Sacred Pause retreat. And I think when you all met, we were maybe on the Big Island in Hawaii, and it was a really beautiful time, and we held you all there. But Emily, you went above and beyond. I know you're more than capable, but I also think it's important to say, thank you, because it hadn't been anticipated when we looked up at the dates and where we were going to be. So thank you for that. We've got Becky coming in. Hey, Becky, welcome. We're just getting started, so glad you could join us. I'm going to start with a quote that I came across today, and it's by Martin Luther King Jr. And one of the many beautiful things he has said, faith is taking the first step, even when you don't see the whole staircase. There's so many ways that we do this. There's a way that each of you and each of your teams have done this with your congregations to say, we're stepping out on faith. Here comes Abby. We're stepping out on faith. And we know that the staircase is there. We know that the pathway is there. And the question becomes, what's it like to be in that? And so tonight, we're providing an opportunity for all of you to have some time for reflection, to have some time to process as a full cohort and smaller groups about what this process is that you have stepped out on faith in, and what it's like. The team has put together a beautiful program that will have you in some small groups and in some larger groups as well. And we've got Dr. Reverend Joey Shelton, as always, who's gonna have reflections as needed and insights, and really just he's another energetic container holder for us. So we're glad to have you as well, Dr. Reverend Joey. And with that, Emily, I'll turn it over to you for the first segment. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Caroline. We are going to do what we've been doing the past few sessions with our shuffle and share. I hope y'all have enjoyed this. But we are going to do it just to get a chance to mix up and chat a little bit. So our question for this evening is, what color reflects your present mood or vibe? I will share. I think the color that I'm resonating with is like a springtime green. I was extremely exhausted yesterday, but I took a restful morning, and then I was feeling motivated, and I've had Senator Cory Booker's speech just like on my phone all day. So I'm feeling like, the inspiration of new life. So yeah, that's my color. I don't know if I could pick it out of a crayon box exactly, but springtime green. So we're gonna give y'all a chance to share with each other. I think the breakout groups should be ready. Let me see the breakout. Yeah.
Yep. You ready for
Okay. Okay. So we'll open the rooms, and you should see the rooms and an invitation to each room, I think.
Folks aren't assigned yet.
Oh,
It didn't do it like we wanted.
yeah, I think something, hold on, I don't know what just happened. I think something got changed. Hold on a second.
Okay.
We were sharing with Margaret that some of us have some beautiful experiences with Zoom today. We see the room, Shauna, but nobody's assigned. There we go.
There we go. Okay.
So it should be on the screen for you now.
Perfect.
Margaret didn't get put. There we go.
That might have been my bad, Shauna. I clicked open and that might have messed it up. My apologies.
No worries at all. It's resolved.
So what's your color, Shauna? What's your color, Joey?
Well, Emily, when you said green, I was actually going to say green because pollen is covering everything. It is a light green pollen that has blanketed all of Clayton, North Carolina.
Mm.
But it's been a great day. So even though I'm a Duke blue person, the sky has been Carolina blue today.
Very nice. Very nice. What about you, Shauna?
Feeling kind of orange today. Kind of like a nice energy. Not too hot, not too fiery, just like the right temperature of fire to get through the day with a nice level of energy.
That's good. I would say violet,
Mm.
which feels like a to me. If were a color. So a little bit of warmth, a little bit of coolness, and it all mixes well.
Nice.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah.
We can.
Oh, I have one quick question. Which churches, everybody's changed their names that Chris is with which church? Chris is,
Chris is pulling.
all right. Becky,
Yeah.
he's gonna be in a group by herself.
Yeah, I don't know where all the St. Charles people are, but
Okay.
I guess yeah, when we do the 4 groups, it's okay. I mean, obviously it will have to be okay for there to be 2 people in some of those. Just 2, yeah.
Oh, you want to, oh, that's right. Those are cross-pollinated. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'll remember that.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. No, it's good.
Did one of y'all put my name on
I
there?
did.
Will you take off the Dr. Reverend and just put Joey?
Yeah.
Thank you.
We just love your fanciness. Where's what I want? Oh, you know what? It's not letting me do that.
I actually preached
Let me see.
Sunday,
Oh, I can.
Yeah.
and it was about identity
Mm-hmm.
and like, what does your name actually mean?
Yeah.
And what is the name that you would hope you would be remembered? What identity would you like to be remembered as? Uh, just your regular name, or like when you look at a gravestone, sometimes they have a little blurb about the person.
Yeah.
And so we're pushing discipleship at the church where I'm working right now part-time. And so what would it mean to have on your gravestone the word neighbor or the word disciple of Jesus? To have your life so identified with lover of God or lover of God and neighbor, that your identity was more than any of that. And Joey means baby kangaroo in Australia. So
I like that. I like that. That's great. We're bringing folks back. Rowan, so glad to have you with us. They were just in small groups talking about if you were going to say it again, Emily. I don't want to get it right.
What color reflects your current mood or vibe? So,
Yeah.
Rowan, if something is coming to you, please share. Mine was a springtime, green, new energy, new life. That's what I shared.
That is lovely. I think I am overcast headache gray right now, but you know, just
That's
But
beautiful.
my favorite color has always been blue. I love blue shirts. The sky is blue in the spring. The sky is blue all year long. Even at Christmas, we decorated our Christmas tree with blue balls. So I love blue.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
We can.
Yay!
Yeah,
I fixed it myself and didn't even have to have my grandson.
terrific.
We're so glad to have your voice in the room. And y'all will, Rowan is with us. This is wonderful. We ebb and we flow. We grow. We wanted to spend just a few minutes tonight and share what you may have gleaned already. When first the Indeed and Truth cohort started, even in the process of gathering the teams, there were churches that stepped in before the cohort met. They were interested, there was energy, and then they were like, well, maybe not now. And over the past 3 months, 2 of the cohort teams, St. James UMC from Greenville, North Carolina, and First Christian Church of Montgomery, Alabama, have pulled back from the cohort activity. And so we wanted to lift that up and take a little time to kind of talk it through. And in the experience, and you all may have had these experiences in organizing engagement and healing work, there is a spectrum of where people land in being in the work and being of the work. Sometimes it's a matter of capacity. We have so much going on, and I know some of you a little better than others and know how full your plates are, right? And sometimes people want to step in on things like anti-racism, on building a history going forward, and don't want to look at the past. There are times when congregation members differ from one another, where church leadership and the intentions of church leadership may be on a different path than what the congregation as a whole is looking for. It comes from different places, and we're going to talk about some of that. And that whole spectrum comes into play with regard to the 2 churches that have chosen not to continue in this process. And so I take a minute or moment to hold love, right? To hold love for where people are and how people are. And that it's a spectrum and a process and an engagement. And we meet people where they are in terms of capacity, in terms of opinions, in terms of how and ways they want to do the work. And with that, I'll pause. Joey, I don't know if you want to speak to it at all. Now, we also wanted to just give space for questions, thoughts, processing, because you were together for almost half a year in different formats. So with that, I will pause.
I'll pick it up. At first, I thought, well, Wilshire doesn't have any of this. We're the most progressive Baptist church in all of Dallas, and we've got a history that will knock everybody's socks off. Well, that has not turned out to be quite like I thought. So now we're struggling with some new revelations as we got into the digging of the history. Unfortunately, our church site sits on the plantation that had the most enslaved people. And of course, it was Indian territory before that. But then we got into the meeting and we're still processing. I'm still processing. I did not realize that we came from a split in another church. And as Margaret said when she saw my face in the meeting, you recognize the name. The pastor of that church was the greatest leader in the civil rights movement at the Southern Baptist Convention in Dallas. He was chairman, eventually first the vice president, appointed by LBJ on the Equal Opportunities Commission, the national organization. So suddenly, well, why did we leave? Why did our church pull out in 1952? What was the big deal? And so I've been corresponding with that pastor's son. It turned out he was a friend of mine. And it was rather startling. The whole thing has been startling. And he's having to reach back 8 decades in his memory to the split. He was present the night it happened. And said basically his father told him, now, son, we've got to be forgiving. We've got to be forgiving. Well, what does that mean?
Well,
Yeah, but Margaret, go ahead.
yeah, I was going to say this. We were having a meeting just kind of talking about how our history committee could work with us. And right at the end of this meeting, well, it was brought up in the meeting that there's a different story of, according to one person, of how we began. And it was kind of this person that said, but she is the only one that I've ever heard say that. So I don't know whether to give credence to it. And then our pastor emeritus walked in and he gave more credibility to this woman's story. And that there may have been the general thought that I picked up on was that the pastor of the church that our groups, our Wilshire Baptist people split from, was just very authoritarian, and that was kind of the reason that people left. But it seems like there's multiple facets to the story. And so
Time that you have a divorce, there are multiple stories. But in this case, I do know the son of the pastor. He can be very arrogant. He's a really great guy, but I don't know whether it's like father, like son. But the thing gets even more complex because the grandfather was one of the initial presidents of the Baptist Sunday School Board in Nashville. And it gets really, really interesting. And I'm thinking we're the great liberals, we're the great progressives, but whoa, wait a minute, why did our earlier, and was it because he was authoritarian, which he probably was?
apparently.
I don't think you get appointed by LBJ, the president, while he's president, to serve on the EEOC, to head up something which our current idiot in the White House basically is getting rid of. I mean, it's all of a sudden we're all sitting here on cutting edge of some of these things. Either and why they left. And apparently there was a business meeting on a Wednesday night where they was so raucous that they issued letters of membership to some of the people who became our foundation people, our forming people. So it must not have been just real pleasant. So anyway, it's an interesting thing how I've done a turnaround in 2 weeks' time, thinking, what are we going to be doing oh my goodness, how are we going to deal with this now? How are we going to explain it? And then to top it all off, Henry writes me a second email earlier this week that said, now listen, Lewis, I want you to be real careful with what I've told you. And I'm going, okay, Henry. Henry
Huh.
was newspaper editor of the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, Mr. Advocate of freedom of the speech and freedom of the press, and then he's telling me, telling me be careful with what I have now said in that first email to you.
Well, you know, he may also be thinking about how clear is my memory, you
Oh, yeah.
know, is, yeah, over the decades, how clear, and I'm just one perspective. He may not want his perspective to take precedence over others or may be concerned about that.
But it does fit with, we saw the pattern of the first person mentioned it. Then the pastor walked in, and then I said, wait a minute. And I added two and two together. And I said, I'll get a hold of Henry this week and talk to him. The pastor knows Henry. So it's not, this is
You're talking about Dr. Mason, George,
George knows my
yeah, our
friend.
former pastor. Yeah.
I mean, so anyway, it's gotten to be an interesting uh, dynamic. It was interesting when I first learned about the plantation because I kept thinking this can't, we're too far east, but no, we're right there, a part of it originally. But apparently our church property was was a cotton field,
Yeah.
but it had deed restrictions that. So anyway, it's fun.
And that's a piece of like what the other churches may be going through. And part of the scenarios that you'll find tonight are going to touch on some of that and how you all engage. We just really wanted to create some space, given the shift. So yeah, Margaret.
I have a question. Uh, do you think entering into some of the church's decisions to withdraw is a fear of maybe opening up something that will be negative for their future growth, like we say, opening a can of worms that they don't know how to deal with or wouldn't know how to deal with?
That certainly seems on the spectrum, but that was not something specific that kind of came up with
Oh,
regard to
I was
these
just
two churches.
okay. I was just wondering about
Yeah,
that.
interesting question. All right, any other, go ahead, Emily.
I think that is a valid thought, most certainly, because oftentimes there's perhaps one or two strong personalities in a congregation that perhaps after they learn something and maybe it's going to shine a poor light on their family, that they may have applied some pressure that was not that was the underlying cause, but they perhaps used something else as a presenting issue. And that's the complexity of all of this, because when you're part of a faith community, not everyone is in the same place in their faith journey as everyone else at the same time. And I know I sound like a broken record, but until each person does some significant personal work on this, you would definitely just need to expect that there is going to be pushback, and it may come from very unexpected places. And it's easy to get your feelings hurt over that, but this kind of work requires all of us to have a pretty strong emotional quotient and to not personalize and take on other people's angst. And I mean, I was pretty dumbfounded when when St. James pulled out. And I've had conversations with the pastor, and it supposedly had nothing to do with people pushing back against being part of this. They were trying to navigate some other issues, which I'm not privy to. It's not my story to tell. But I wouldn't be surprised if some of what we are about might have just been the tipping point for some other conversations. And so keeping them in our prayers, I think would be an important thing. Because you very well in the future could lose friendships over these type conversations. Or if not lose them, you might not have the same intimacy of connection in the friendship. And I say intimacy in a spiritual form there. So that's where I'm sitting right now. And I was really interested to hear if, what some of your reactions was, so that we can make sure everybody's able to give voice to what they perhaps what you might be feeling, because it is like losing, it's like, well, we lost partners.
Mhm.
So there's a little grief that goes with that too.
Yeah.
It's a very volatile time, and this issue is part of the volatility. I'm on a city committee here in my city where we're working on a memorial to the original Black community and the first Black church in town and all of these things. And there's a lot of uneasiness. I mean, what we've got planned is a really big step forward, we don't know what's going to happen. But, I mean, we've got a president and a governor who are not on our side. We're waiting and saying, well, what happens if the city gets an edict? They can't spend the money on DEI, which is what we're really doing. And what makes this thing even more volatile is I'm president of a private organization, a nonprofit, and we started off initially, we offered to pay for the memorial a small amount. We offered $10,000, and the city stepped in and they've really multiplied it 7 to 8-fold. And we don't know where this is going to go. We just don't. And I think that's where we're all at in this country right now. We are in this, and we all think churches are secure and safe. Well, I don't know. My wife says over and over after we leave church on Sunday, at least we had freedom of worship today.
Well, and yes, all of that and more. So the context for tonight is going to allow you all to be in that space. And the knowing that it's all grounded in the divine, it's all grounded in God's work. And how do we keep coming back to it? That's the challenge I find. It's like, I got to go, oh yeah, love. Oh yeah, God, which to me is one and the same. So thank you all for giving us the space to just raise this up with you all. There may be further discussions. I'm going to turn it over to Emily for the next component.
Yeah, and we really are, this whole session is going to be a continuation of that conversation. Joey, I thank you for sharing. Margaret and Lewis. This is the whole idea is to continue um, this conversation our congregation, about our congregations um, and how, you know, we interact with this work. So I'm just going to share my screen real quick. And let me just slideshow. Okay. And so hopefully you all can see this. Let me just get out of, okay. So yeah, hold on a second. Okay. Are you still looking at the slides? You still see the slides? The
No,
slide?
we've got the run of shows up.
Okay. Okay, Caroline or Shauna, could you share
Yeah,
them?
and the slideshow worked when you had it up. We could see it.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
can see the slideshow. If you click on slide, it may.
Yeah, but I'm gonna ask Shauna if you would share so that I can look at my notes.
Oh, gotcha. Of course.
Um, okay, so yeah, like I was saying, we're just this, I don't want you to feel like that was the only segment of the time that we have to discuss um these partners of ours in this work that have stepped back or how this is playing out in our churches. We're really hoping to do that this whole session. So, we want to focus on some of the real challenges that come with this work, not only, you know, what's happening in our country, in our neighborhoods, in our churches, but, you know, the past several months of sessions that we've had through the cohort, we've been, you know, thinking about hard things, right? Like looking back at the church's history with slavery, um, preparing ourselves for hard conversations, and especially last month with Dr. Kimberly, where we're considering, you know, the ever-changing racial definitions and how they shape American history. So, like Joey said, a lot of these topics have the potential to really cause tension within relationships and within churches, and that pushback or resistance doesn't mean you've done something wrong. It can be expected, but you know, that doesn't mean we always know how to deal with it. And also, I think as Caroline shared in the beginning, as Shauna's going to talk about, as we've been talking about the importance of kind of regrounding ourselves in starting with our history, as Lewis and Margaret were sharing about how that process has unfolded recently at Wilshire. I just wanted to share this quote I read this morning from Timothy Snyder. He's a historian and he wrote the book on tyranny. He shared, I spent the morning today at the National Museum of Civil Rights in Memphis, which provides a firm reminder of the need for memory and for discussion of events that make us uncomfortable, as good history always will. We need history not to confirm that how we feel now is right, but rather to teach us more about where we come from than we can know ourselves. This involves recognition that our pasts can be different, which enables the empathy that we will need for democracy. And I would add the empathy we need to be the body of Christ, to be a church, to be a community. You know, when we think about our history, kind of like what you just said, Margaret, and these different sort of perspectives, we have to recognize that it's not just one history that we're looking back on. But we need to hear these different pasts that come together to make our story so that we can have empathy for one another. So we're going to consider some scenarios. Now, in our time together, y'all are going to have a chance to reflect and share how you might feel and respond. We do want to remember, you know, our best large group practices so that everyone has a chance to share. We're going to look at a scenario all together, and then we're going to break out into groups where you'll be with people from other churches, and you can talk about or role play your scenario. After we do the small groups, we'll take a break and then we'll come back together. Before we show the scenario, I just want to encourage everyone to, as I'll read it out loud and give us some time, I want you to just really reflect on, like, how does your body feel as you are hearing and reading the words of the scenario? What's your instinctive response? And, are there places in your body where you feel tension, where you feel stress? Just think about that, so you can be present to that as we go, and allow yourself to just kind of feel that before jumping into a response. So, yeah, we will go into the first scenario. Yep, that's good. So this scenario is about losing members. It says, a longtime member shares that he's leaving your church because he's, quote, tired of coming to church every week and being called a racist. He knows diversity is important, but he doesn't understand why he must be made to feel bad about it. So just take some time to reflect on how you might respond, where you feel the situation in your body. And we'll give it a minute or two, and then we'll open up for a discussion. Okay. Yeah, we can open up for discussion if anyone has thoughts they want to share, questions about the scenario, or how, how you might imagine this would play out.
Um, I guess it depends on my relationship with the member. If it's a friend of mine, and it depends on where we are. If somebody if like we're in the sanctuary after church and somebody says something, I would want to say, hey, I'd love to talk to you more about it, about what you're feeling, what's going on. Can we go to lunch or something? It wouldn't be something I would want to have like a quick
Yeah.
2-minute conversation about.
Yeah.
If it's a friend or somebody, this is an important conversation that to me needs care. How it makes me feel, it hurts my heart.
Yeah.
For a lot of reasons. And I would want to spend some time with that person, and I would want to know where they're coming from. I had to get their feelings about why, how, has anybody actually called them a racist? Where their perception of this is coming from, and and parse out some more of that.
Yeah, I totally agree with Juliana. This just makes me feel, I know it's a scenario, but it makes me feel grief. And definitely would want to explore with them their feelings and how they came to the conclusions they've come to.
Thank y'all for sharing. Is there anyone else who wants to speak to this? Sure, Becky.
Yeah, so I can think of several people that have left our congregation like this. Or who have said things like this and didn't leave. And I see Rowan smiling. I bet he knows who I'm thinking about, at least in part. And depending on the setting, the timing, and so forth, sometimes it kind of hits me in my chest. And sometimes it feels like a relief. And that's related to discord going on over a protracted period of time, related to not wanting to hear about racial justice issues talked about. And a discomfort that appears to me, having been in the same places and conversations, to have been internalized accusations of racism, not directed ones, and a discomfort with being involved in the conversation. And I'm always sad, sad both for the congregation and the community, but for the person too. Because I remember times that some of the things I've heard some of these people say are things that have gone through my mind in the past, in terms of not fully understanding ways in which I am a racist, though I don't want to be, and being able to talk about that. That's a process to get there. And it's a process you have to be willing to go through, and you have to be in a place in your life spiritually and otherwise to be able to do it, I would say. And so it's I think it's a real challenge for those of us who are trying to do this work from a faith-based perspective. And how do we do it in a way that enables folks to go through that process, if they are willing, if they are ready, when they are willing, when they are ready. And at the same time, doesn't fail to challenge all of us around places we need to grow. And so those are the ways that it's striking me.
Thank you for that. Yeah, thank you, each of you, for sharing. We're all gonna have a chance to think more about some challenging scenarios in these smaller groups. As we move into that, I just want to remind us of the compass, the courageous conversation compass that Glenn shared with us. I think that was in February. And again, he offered it as a tool. It's just one tool, but as a tool to help us kind of orient ourselves when we are faced with a difficult topic or conversation. We start by kind of identifying which quadrant our own response to a topic lands. And the idea is to use that as an opportunity to connect with another person. So Becky, like you just said, recognizing that that person may hold beliefs that at one time you held, and is that an opportunity to be able to connect around shared values or shared thinking, or thinking that you once shared. So we just offer that as a tool, and we want to keep bringing back the things that we have gained and gleaned throughout the cohort. So we're gonna move into the small groups. Before we do that, I just want to put out there as an instruction, as a group, you can decide if you want to role play your situation. The groups will be probably 2 or 3 people. So if you want to actually act it out, please feel free. You can also just talk about it. And also, I just want to offer that if you have experienced a situation like this that you will have in your group, try to have an open posture. Rather than pulling from, well, I did this, and so let me tell you all, and so I think it's a really important time to learn from each other and to listen and to think, to be open to new possibilities. There's also some kind of questions that you'll have um, on the sheet for each of your groups. So let me just share this link. So you'll see in the chat, there's a link to a Google folder. And that has a document for each group, and then also the Courageous Conversations Compass. So Caroline, you can open the groups, and each of your groups in that document has its own scenario. So we're going to give y'all probably about 15, I think, minutes in the group. Then we'll break. Okay. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. We are going to thank you all for engaging in those conversations. We're gonna have a chance now, and considering these scenarios, again, these might not be the first time that you've thought about these specific scenarios. So just really grateful for this chance to do it together as a group. We are going to now take time for each group to kind of share with the whole group, their scenario, what their discussion brought up, any insights that you want to share, feedback, that kind of thing. So, Shauna, would you mind sharing the slides again? We'll start with group 1, and we'll give each group about 5 minutes or so to share. So yeah, group 1. I don't remember who was in group 1. But if you were in group 1, then hopefully you remember that. Let's see. Okay, Becky, Kathy, Joey, and Lewis.
I'll just briefly kick it off. I think the scenario was quite familiar to all of us. And so there was some conversation about what some of those experiences were and about the trauma and
And
challenge.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. Becky, would you mind reading the scenario? Because no one else has actually seen it besides your
Oh,
group.
I apologize. Thank you. Yeah, so the church leader and congregation are not on the same page. The pastor wants to lead the congregation through work like IDAT, and the congregation resists. A particular vocal member of the church has not only expressed their displeasure, but has even started conversations to vote the pastor out. Meanwhile, the pastor feels they are faced with choosing between church growth and telling the truth about the church's history. So none of us talked about this in the context of our IDAT experience, but rather past experiences that we have seen things like this happen, perhaps related to conversations about race and racial justice, and perhaps about other things. But again, trauma and trying to kind of figure out the pathway through things like this, and how to I raised that the restorative justice approach is one that unfortunately we haven't exercised our muscles about enough in congregations, and to me is the way we should be learning how to deal. Excuse me, the allergies are driving me crazy. How to deal with situations like this, rather than the kind of power plays and confrontation. But I would invite other people who were in the conversation to share too.
Oh, Lewis, you're muted.
Yes, I am. I'm not, okay? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
What I shared was my wife and I consider ourselves multi-churchal. And so not only are we members of Wilshire, but we have several other churches that we are very intimately involved with. And First Presbyterian Garland went through a scenario very much like this. And what I shared with the group was it was very, very damaging. But in the end, we were there 3 weeks ago for the Sunday morning worship service, and it was a beautiful, beautiful, multicultural, multiracial service that was it was just very exciting. But along the way, 20 of the best financial givers to the church were gone. The pastor who he's a close friend of ours, did a great job. He was gone. I mean, it was quite turbulent, and it was miserable to watch. I shared that one of the 20 was our insurance agent, and unfortunately, I was renewing our policies, 10 policies during that period, and I got so tired of her responses and her version. I changed changed insurance agents over it. I just, she was very adamant. She was very angry, very bitter, and it was inappropriate to bring that into our financial discussions. But on the other hand, she hit the church over the head by withdrawing all of her finances. So, these things are never easy. They're never easy at all. We can idealize them, but in the end, it's a beautiful service. It really was.
Thank you. I don't know. Kathy, did you want to add anything from this group? Oh, and you're muted also. Kathy. Kathy, you're muted. Sorry.
Sorry. We ran out of time talking about it, but I just noted that it also can go the other way where members are pushing and the pastor is resistant simply for the reasons that Lewis has talked about, that pastors are afraid that people are going to leave. I don't know any church that's not struggling to some degree around money and attendance since COVID. So it's a really tough one. It's also very, very common. And I'll let I think it was Margaret that talked a little bit about depends on who it was, how you might approach it. If there was someone who No, that was back in the first group. Sorry about that. That was back with the first scenario.
Thank you. Joey, did you want to add anything from that group?
I think that it really boils down to leadership in the church that doesn't, that I think the issue for pastors, and I'll just approach this from a pastoral perspective, pastors are constantly challenged to be pastoral and to be prophetic. And nobody likes a prophet. All you got to do is read the Bible and you can figure that one out. And so for prophetic things like IDAT to take place, there has to be strong lay leadership. And otherwise, the pastor will end up either leaving or it won't go anywhere because it has to be by the people.
Yeah.
It's not sustainable if it's not by the people.
Thank you. Thank you all. Let's move on to breakout group 2. Juliana, Mary, Rowan, Caroline. And Shauna, can you go to the next slide?
We didn't pick anyone to speak, but I see Rowan leaning in.
I was hoping I would see someone else leaning in if I looked closer.
Can you read it for us, Rowan?
I can't because
Okay.
I'm not seeing the shared thing anymore somehow.
I can read it.
Or I
Okay.
can, yeah.
Yeah, so while you have noticed some enthusiasm for IDAT work, there is a small vocal group of opponents within your church, including some lay leaders. You have seen this dynamic before around other issues and fear this small group could derail progress, even though most people are in favor of continuing.
Yeah. So we talked a lot about a lot of us in the group had natural inclination towards conflict avoidance, and how that impulse can lead you to not want to sit in the conversations that maybe you need to be having. And we also talked about, it sounds like a lot of the things that came up in the first group of those fears of losing members, fears of splitting the church. And many churches have been through things like that where they've lost a sizable chunk of congregation over something or other. But we did also kind of talk about sort of the being willing to have the conversation, being willing to like really try to get to the why, whether through one-on-one conversations or like listening sessions or things like that. And also to be willing to like listen for a why that is maybe not, maybe your first gut reaction of the why is something somewhat judgmental, but maybe the why is basically the same fears that you're having, just coming out in a different way of, another fear of this splitting, of losing people or splitting the church or the difficult conversations or the things they may learn about themselves. And we also talked a lot about, we did, maybe this was just me because I always have a lot of feelings about everything, but a lot about the feelings of kind of the fear of disappointment and the way that could kind of, the fear of being disappointed in someone you love, basically, of, finding out that your deeply held beliefs are not held by people you admire, and things like that. Or, and then we also talked about the idea that maybe sometimes the right path is to let people go, and with as much whenever possible, with as much gentleness as grace as you can, so that there's a path to come back. Should that be the right choice? But that also maybe we aren't always the right place for everyone at every time. And that, maybe this church is not the right place for someone at that point on their journey. Maybe they need something else. And that's not necessarily a slam on them and where they are. It may, I mean, yeah, I think I covered it.
Yeah. Thank you. Anyone else from the group have anything else to add? Thank you.
Great job, Rowan.
Thank you. All right. And if anyone else who wasn't in these groups has a question, please feel free to, please feel free to ask. But let's move on to group 3, Chris and Margaret and Shauna.
Chris, would you mind reading ours?
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Shauna, if you want to, or I will, whichever.
Yeah, go ahead.
Some church members express, directly and indirectly, that this work is unnecessary because a handful of Black and other people of color have recently started attending the church.
This is my worst fear, Wilshire, of what we're going to run into. We've got a Black pastor now, we've got a Black minister of music, and we've got a tiny handful of Black members. We have one Latino, or maybe two, that I know of, but I think we're going to run into this very thing. I don't want to be negative or throw cold water on it, but fear.
Well, Chris, I don't know, you're not in my view right now.
Yeah, we see you, and Chris is
Okay,
here. Yeah, if either of
okay.
you want to share.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, we talked about several different things. Chris really emphasized how important it is to build authenticity in relationships. And I guess for myself, thinking that this work is unnecessary it's hard for me to comprehend that someone would think it is unnecessary because of our culture, the culture our church is in. I don't know how it can't be an issue because it's such an issue in our nation as a whole. And I express, and maybe I was getting too far afield, but that I don't feel like our nation has as a whole, and this relates especially to Black people, but that as a whole, our nation has ever repented and asked God's forgiveness for slavery. And I don't think our nation can endure if we don't come to that point. So I just bring out that for what it's worth.
We're going in the opposite direction right now. Leadership.
Chris, do you have anything to add from this group?
No, sort of it. I was just saying I feel like it's important to try to understand what's behind the thinking of people who associate. If we just put brown and Black bodies, in the pews, then that means we're no longer anti-racist, or we don't have to really address this situation anymore. And this sort of leads to the artificial separation of it. Sort of like I feel like what comes up a lot in our church is this assumption that like we want to, like, anti-racism, the fear is that's going to mean that our focus is going to be trying to become an integrated church, and as opposed to just focusing on policies or understanding our history. But to me, those two things can't be separated, because to me it makes it easy, I feel like, for white people to just sort of, to say, okay, we now have black and brown bodies in our congregation, so now we're not racist anymore. We don't have to think about this anymore. Whereas that doesn't have anything to do with having an authentic relationship. If you're still white centered in your culture and your approach to policies in your church, and your history is still reflecting of a whitewashed kind of history, there's a disconnect there. It kind of lets white people off the hook. So the two have to be addressed hand in hand. I mean, yes, addressing policies in the history is important, but you can't have a true, I feel like, reconciliation and healing process that's transformational unless there are authentic relationships being forged, which means white people have to look, I think Shauna was making this too, you have to take ownership for yourself, in terms of, well, why don't you speak to that, Shauna, because that was kind of the point you were making too.
Shauna had it good.
I think a big point that we came to was anti-racist is describing us, our own behavior, our church's behavior,
Right.
and people's choice of where to attend church or not to attend is their behavior. And so really focusing on this work, regardless of who's coming in the door, how many of whoever is there, at the end of the day, what we have control over is our own behavior. And if we are being in measuring that. So we were just, I guess, kind of emphasizing that distinction between what it means to be anti-racist versus building up a more diverse congregation, because those can be related, but are still distinct objectives.
Thank you. Thank you, group 3. We're gonna move on to group 4 now. Abby, Shalise, and Sean. And if one of y'all could read the scenario.
I'll read the scenario and get us started.
Okay.
Your pastor gathers the IDAT committee for an emergency meeting on a Thursday evening to share that earlier that day, she arrived at the church to find the church's beloved stained glass windows had been vandalized. This incident came a few weeks after your committee started holding small group conversations with congregants and community members about their perspectives on the window's historical imagery. In those conversations, it became clear that people had strong feelings, positive and negative, that they had never shared. The pastor is approaching your committee because she is not sure what to do. So I shared that just by nature, my stomach would hurt that I got called into a private meeting and it was just the IDAT committee. Feeling nervous that perhaps, I don't know, there was that we were to blame for stirring this up. But beyond, after getting over that, I mean, I would hope that the IDAT committee would be a valuable resource for the pastor, to remind them of how important these conversations are, to offer our support for continued conversations, to lead with curiosity as always, to avoid making assumptions or placing blame, and just moving from there to have more conversations and kind of work through what those feelings were and how the church will move forward in making repairs or replacements to the sanctuary glass. Anybody else?
I just kind of said that in the congregation, like I'd be disappointed that in the congregation we didn't have kind of like the relational capital to be able to like talk through this to a solution that hopefully could work for everybody. But it also depends sometimes on where you are in the process. Like sometimes people get frustrated. I also said that, like if it's like if somebody like threw a brick through the stained glass, window of like Robert E. Lee's face, like I'm also not gonna be ultimately crying about it. You know what I'm saying? Like it will almost seem it's like this is where we are now. It might signify that like maybe some voices feel unheard at the table, or maybe we're not doing as well as we thought we were. Definitely signifies how important the the work is, right? And I would also be curious about whether it's an opportunity for us to go forward in a better path.
Sean, do you have anything you want to add?
I would just say that it reminds me over and over again about how hard it is to to be together as a group, right? To be on the same page, to know what everyone is feeling, to stay in touch. I did not say this in our group, but I talked about a different event that happened in our church just past that this scenario kind of reminded me of. But now it reminds me more of the conversation about whether now that we're all Baptist churches in our little IDAT group, it reminds me of the conversation of whether we want to retain Baptist in the name of our church or not. So yeah, it's very hard. People don't talk about stuff until, some people don't talk about their feelings about these sorts of things until it's painful. It's a hard one for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, well, thank you all for engaging with these scenarios, for wading into all of the feelings, physical feelings, emotional feelings that they bring up. We wanted to take this opportunity, and hopefully these scenarios will stay with you. We will share them out as part of the resources, but just one to kind of remind us that, we think the hardest part of the work, we talk about the work, but the hardest part of that is really the internal, who am I? Who are we as a church? And that's why we focus first on history. Because we know that the sharing and telling of stories opens us up to a deeper level of being in community and building relationships, like several of you have said, following up maybe in a one-on-one conversation, seeking to understand, why this person is feeling this way, what's behind what they're saying. And also for us to just really think about what it means to actually be ready to have hard conversations, and to kind of understand what's our own posture, and recognizing, I think Joey said it earlier, that when we think about a congregation, that's, people all along the spectrum. And so, the challenge of how do we accept and meet people where they're at, and oftentimes be willing to let go of the outcome. So yeah, I'm grateful for that, and we're going to continue this conversation about engaging our congregations, as Sean is going to lead us now in some more thoughts and discussion about the June activity in our churches.
Wow. Hello, everyone. I think, and let me make sure I'm going the right way, because I feel like I've been going backwards sometimes there we go. Well, one thing you may have noticed that all of the scenarios have in common is that we did not end with a concrete response on how it should be handled. And that is because we don't know these answers, right? It's not all the same. It's not going to be the same for every situation, for every church. It's not going to be the same set of circumstances. And so what we really wanted to do, and why we wanted to be able to bring this conversation now specifically, is we know that with the June activity, we're putting you, we're kind of creating that environment where you're going to now be talking more openly about this with your church. Not that you haven't been so far, but this is now an activity that's going to kind of push maybe a little bit more conversation with others that have not been engaged in the IDAT work thus far. And so we just wanted to be realistic and have a chance to really think about what this really means. As Emily mentioned, we hear the phrase, doing the work, the hard work a lot. And I think a lot of times we tend to default to the hard work being talking about slavery, talking about racism, talking about some of the things that are hard to name. And that is difficult, that is challenging. But as she mentioned, the really hard work is, what does that mean when you're having those conversations, and how might it disrupt whatever type of relationship or balance that you currently have? And how do you deal with that? It's a very different thing to have something that can be external, that you can leave and turn off when you're ready, or something that kind of has a lasting impact and that can rock relationships. So that's why we wanted to bring this in now and to think about it. And so starting off as well with the quotes to kind of bring us in. And this one's from Maya Angelou. She says, "I have great respect for the past. If you don't know where you've come from, you don't know where you're going." And that sentiment, has also been expressed by others in smaller words, but it's one of the things that we hold really dear, and what the kind of sentiment that really is the foundation of this particular program and this curriculum, to really focus on history as a starting point. She does go on to say, "I have respect for the past, but I'm a person of the moment. I'm here and I do my best to be completely centered in the place that I'm at, and then I go forward to the next place." So we find it equally important to not be paralyzed by the past and not be held back by what we find. It's important to find it, to acknowledge it, to let it guide us in the way it's supposed to the next steps, but also not to let it hold us back. And I just find that to be a very powerful thought as I think about all of the work that you all are doing in your respective congregations. We've been talking a lot in these scenarios about how congregations may react in different pieces about how that might impact. And another piece about the past that I like to kind of bring to bear is, you all are also in the process with this work of looking to become allies with groups and churches and community organizations that you may not have worked with in the past. And this, knowing and understanding your history is just as important for those relationships as it is for the internal congregation relationships. And one of the reasons that we keep bringing it up and keep bringing it back to this is, one of the first things, or one of the potential barriers that you could face as you form these new ally partnerships in the community around your anti-racist work, is if there is not an understanding of where you've been and a reckoning and a public acknowledgement of that, you might find others hesitant to partner with you, because they might feel like, well, why aren't they talking about what they've done in the past? How can we feel comfortable moving forward if we're not sure about how they feel about this? We don't think that they're necessarily doing it now, but if they haven't spoken up about saying they want to make a change, or that they feel like that decision by their church 10, 15, 30, 50 years ago wasn't a good decision, then how can we feel confident to be a new partner with them today in 2025? And so that's part of that hard work that we're looking at now, to help you all kind of lay that groundwork for what you are looking at moving forward. So we're just doing today kind of a basic run through, going back to the good old who, what, when, where, why, and kind of using that to frame some thinking around what the June activity can look like. We'll give this to you in a written form as well. And at the end of the session, we'll have the rooms open again and available if you all want to continue working on this. We can also share the link to the presentation so that you'll have that in those breakout rooms. But just wanted to run through kind of a little framework to help get some of that thought process started. And I thought that as a group, we could quickly, on a couple of these, probably not all of them, but on a couple, we could do a little brainstorming out loud together as well to kind of start the juices flowing. But so starting out with who, this is just you all thinking as a group, who outside of this IDAT group that's been meeting do you want to collaborate with on your June activity? And we've shifted our language from June event to June activity, because we really want to emphasize we're not looking for you to do some huge, labor intensive, resource intensive, big event. This is really just about you all having a moment to bring in some more people in the congregation that haven't been part of the conversation already. It's a way to think about, let's show you what we've talked about so far. Let's see if you might be interested in joining us on next steps, and let's kind of bring you into this. So is there a specific minister or other lay leader or congregation member that you might want to give the opportunity to speak or engage or be a part of the planning? Have they shown that they might enjoy this from their own work? Is there a particular voice that has come up in y'all's discussions or that you can think about now that you've kind of been having these conversations that you think it could be interesting to be heard? You know, so who should be in the room and kind of the planning and the ideas around this? Who would you want to incorporate that maybe they weren't able to join IDAT because of other commitments, but for something like this, that's a one-time, short-term, you know, activity, they might be able to participate. And I see I'm getting pretty dark. I apologize. See if that's a little better.
Could I ask, what is the activity and
Oh,
when? I'm sorry, informed.
Oh, no, absolutely no. And it's been a minute since we talked about that.
Yeah.
So thank you for bringing me back.
Yeah.
So one of your kind of milestone moments in this program that we're hoping to support you in creating is holding some type of an activity in June in person at your congregation. And again, this can, we're heading into the what, so I'll shift over to that. But this can be a discussion. It can be a meeting. It could be a special service if you wanted to take it to that point. It could be a prayer service where you think about things you want to pray over, a presentation. It could be any form. So the idea is that we're not trying to prescribe, and that's where we really want to emphasize. This doesn't have to be a big production, but it's the idea that you have a moment to be able to, you have a couple of key things that you're doing here at this event. The first is that you're able to kind of share what the IDAT group has done to date and kind of who you are and what you're planning to do, and basically have an invitation for others that might be interested to join in. Another piece of this is,
Is there a specific date? I'm thinking of Juneteenth because we are really deeply involved in the celebration of Juneteenth in our community this year. And I don't have anything else added to my plate. Are we talking early June, Juneteenth weekend? Are we talking about late June?
It's us. It's up to us.
Go ahead, Abby.
I believe it's up to us to schedule.
Okay, all right.
Yes, anytime within the month of June. And if you already have things going on and you feel like it could be a part of that, you don't necessarily have to do an entire separate event. It's just thinking about, this might be an opportunity to think about, is there a moment during our planned celebration where we can share a little bit about IDAT? So you don't have to have a completely separate activity. Is that appropriate? We're also not trying to take over your existing activities, but the reason I'm bringing this up is we're looking for ways for this to be as limitedly intrusive as possible. What is something you already do? Do you already have a monthly meeting? And what is it possible that for June your monthly meeting could be something where IDAT is the topic of conversation? Do you already have a mechanism for bringing folks together, and maybe this can be the theme for that month's gathering? So it's not about necessarily creating something new, but it's just about finding an opportunity that makes sense for you all to bring this work to some other members of the congregation. There are two key pieces that we talked about having at the June event. One is a physical representation of some key events on your church's history timeline. And the idea behind this was thinking about an exercise where participants and congregation members will have the opportunity to add themselves to this timeline or other important events. And again, this does not have to be high tech. You could have some poster board up there with some key moments in the church's history, and then have your congregation members fill out a post-it note of a certain date that was important to them in terms of their relationship with the church, and they just stick it on. Because again, it's not about the production. What we're trying to do is bring them into the fold. It can be really challenging, and all of you all come from churches that are pretty sizable. And we know it can be really hard when you have a lot of committees doing good work, but it can feel sometimes like the committees are working in silos, and that only 4 or 5 people are engaged in each bit of work. And so what we're trying to think about is how do we incorporate this work on kind of in a way a systemic level for your church? How do we start talking about it and incorporating this into everything that you're doing so that you can move away from it being a small committee and get to the point where you've been able to integrate your anti-racist principles across all the work that's already happening in your church? So this is the first step, is just thinking about how to connect them with that and how to bring them into that activity. And then the second piece is the actual discussion about IDAT and letting them know what you all are doing and kind of giving an invitation for people to join in and be a part in some way. Does that make, is that clear? Do people feel like that kind of cleared that up a bit?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Okay. So again, if you've got something going on already where a few minutes can be kind of dedicated to this piece, or the timeline activity can be added in, that's good. And I'm gonna brush through quick, or just kind of overview the next couple pieces quickly. So these are kind of just, again, designed to help you get you thinking, and start kind of some of those initial steps. The when, of course, what specific day and time in June would work. So starting to think about that piece and any arrangements that might need to be made for, reserving the room in your church building or whatever has to go around that piece. The where, what is the physical space that might make sense for what it is that you're wanting to do. And we're, kind of connecting that to the what, what format, what do we want to talk about? What shape might this look like? What does it look, what makes sense for the personality and the structure of our church and how we operate? And now this one, the why, I think is a really interesting one that I really want you all to have a chance to think about. Now we know the why in terms of for IDAT, there's a goal um, associated simply with your association with the program and what we would like getting you closer to integrating this into the church. But I would like you all to think about a specific why for yourselves, for the congregation. How do you want your congregation members to feel after they have a chance to engage with you, after they engage with the timeline and integrate themselves with the history, after they learn a little bit more about what you're trying to do as a church and have the opportunity to think about how they might fit in? What do you want them to take away from that? Do you feel like you might have a specific ask that you're ready to put to them? And you don't have to if you're not at that point, but it might be as simple as, if you want to know more and stay up to date on the IDAT, sign up on our email sheet so we can have, a specific list of people that we know wants to remain involved if you're interested in the history or some of the other things that we're doing. So just kind of thinking about a concrete thing that would make you feel after the event was that this was a success. We feel like we had a positive connection and a positive engagement in our congregation. What would make you say that at the end of this activity so that we can help support you in working toward an activity that will get you to that point? And then the last one is kind of the how. So this is just some of those initial starter questions, that logistical piece, who's kind of coordinating this bit and, starting to think about, we're going to need supplies. Are we serving food? And what kind of materials might we need? And just those little questions, but mostly kind of thinking about starting that process of organizing it and taking on those tasks. So we really just wanted to start that conversation here. Caroline, Emily, and I are all available. We can have one-on-one or group-on-one or whatever needs to happen to kind of help you all as you're planning and working towards this. Again, we want everything that we're doing here to be a support to what you're trying to accomplish. Any questions on any of that? I know you've had a lot of discussion, a lot of information this session. All right. Well, then I'm going to turn it over to Caroline, and I'll stop sharing.
So, and I'll lift up, Louis, that y'all are going to have a wonderful togetherness with Shauna and Emily at the end of April and be able to also do some more dive in. We're going to be having some engagement with St. Charles, and I know just by being here in New Orleans, they've already done some things along this line, which is not to say they're ahead of the game per se, but there's time and engagement. The questions and slides that Shauna showed will be put up on Mighty Networks. So you'll have access to all of what was shared today. If you want to look at the other scenarios and kind of talk it through, if you want to just utilize those, they're available. Again, so end of the month, Shauna and Emily are going to head over to Dallas. And over the course of the next few days, Shauna and Emily and I will be in New Orleans having gatherings with the St. Charles team, including going to the church service on this coming Sunday. So really looking forward to that opportunity and that intentionality. It sounds like I missed a wonderful time with the pull-in group. Shauna and Emily came back just almost giggly and giddy in terms of that. And I'll just say, Emily, the breakout groups are set. FYI, thank you. I see your text. A couple of other things I want to lift up. There is a Duke Divinity School has a summer institute on reconciliation every year. I've put the link here. We'll send it out. It's May 14th to 16th. It's a beautiful engagement. I think, Joey, you'll be there. I think Jay helps organize it. It's just an opportunity to be with people of faith who are continuing to dive into reconciliation, the Purple Church, all of what you all are doing. And so there's that opportunity. We also want you to save the date for the November summit, the IDAT summit that will be right here in New Orleans. We will have resources to help get the out-of-towners here to town. And IDAT will show you a good time right here on this corner of Broadway and St. Charles Avenue. We may do some additional things, but again, the programming will start November 13th in the evening and go till about noon on the 16th. More details to come in November. I believe it's not a Saints football weekend, but also the schedule may not be out. For those of you not from New Orleans, it's a real deal in terms of scheduling things. So hopefully that will go well. Joey, you've heard a lot, you've been engaged a lot. Any parting words that you'd like to share and perhaps close us out in prayer?
It's an honor to be with you and part of this work. I have been learning a prayer for this Lenten season. And I would love to share it with you tonight and ask as I say a line, if you really feel courageous to repeat the line, that will be great. So here goes. All that I have is a gift from you.
All that I have is a gift from you.
It's a gift from you.
To you, O Lord, I return it.
To you,
To
To
you,
you,
O
O
Lord,
Lord, I return it.
Everything is yours.
everything is yours.
Everything is yours.
Do with it what you will.
Do with
Do
it what
with
you
it
will.
What you will.
All that I ask is that you give me your love and your grace.
All that
I
I
ask
ask
that
is that
you
you
give me
your love
your love
and your
and your
grace.
grace.
That is enough for me.
That is enough.
It's enough
Enough
for me.
Amen.
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 Thank you so much. So I will open the rooms if anybody has questions before going into the rooms. The rooms are again optional. It was a beautiful idea by one of the cohort members to say we're together. Can we just use this time as well? So those are open. They'll be open for the next 15 to 30 minutes. And otherwise, if you have questions, let me know, let us know, reach out too.
And I
Happy
just
Easter.
dropped,
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Jonna.
I just dropped the link to tonight's presentation. So if you go into groups and you'd like to ponder some of those questions, it's there.
Okay.
Thank you.